Today, the urge toward universality is deeply felt by everyone. It is the reaction against a whole century spent in living from day to day. What we see around us is the reckoning that this short-sightedness has piled up. This living from day to day, from hour to hour, with no feeling for the relationships, does not merely lack dignity, it is neither natural nor human. It leads to a perception of events as isolated points rather than parts of a process, with dimensions reaching out into history. Everyone knows that we have far more means of bringing change under far-sighted control than any of the peoples of earlier times. It is the new potentialities at our disposal which are the key to a new and balanced life for enormous numbers of people. The desire for universality is an expression of the need we feel to master and coordinate these new potentialities. It is always dangerous to assume that one's own time has an exceptional importance. Even so, the years through which we are living seem to constitute a test period for mankind, a test of man's ability to organise his own life. So,
cool. Well, that's a little quote from a happy Swiss guy called Sigfried Giedion.
Yes.
We are going to talk about one of his big books,
Space,
Time,
and
Architecture.
We're entering a conjunction. The moment is now for a revolution in design, aesthetics, the economy, everyday life. Everything is going to come together and we're going to achieve a new synthesis, a new sort of synchronicity.
We're going to enter a delicious new age.
A delicious new age. It's the age of Aquarius. It's literally the age of Aquarius, but very Swissly rather than
it's
through
Swiss oblongs.
Swiss oblongs rather than the musical Hair, which I think is where I'm familiar with that phrase from. So he was writing this around 1940 in a world at war.
I think he wrote the bulk of it from 1938, the end of 1938 to 1940.
Yeah.
Although I think it's kind of got reworkings of chunks of stuff he'd put in previous books.
Yeah, but he kind of... Well, he's got all kinds of motivations for writing it, but very much the argument that he's making is, this is a pivotal moment. This is a moment in time where everything is going to change, and it's also a moment where there is this kind of new synchronicity, this new interconnectedness, a new sort of synthesis between the arts, the sciences, civilization as a whole, the totality of life, is becoming kind of achieving a greater level of kind of self-awareness.
Before we explore that too much, who is he, and what is this book?
Yeah,
and what are the conditions of its creation?
So the book is large.
It's big. Oh, we could do a little question. What had you heard about this before? Had you heard about this in...
This didn't feature in my education at all, but it is one of the canonical what's modern architecture texts. And when you're trying to characterise, what's modern architecture about, how does it arise, how do these quite significant transformations in building technology, building aesthetics, and the kind of ideology of design come about in the early part of the 20th century, this is one of the canonical texts that explain it all. I mean,
and how would you characterise its reputation?
Well, it's kind of long. It's enthusiastic.
I would say intimidating.
Maybe a little.
Veiled in... It's like important modernist texts. Very long German scholarship. I don't think the book really is that much like that, actually, but I hadn't met anyone who'd made it all the way through. Have you?
No. Well, I don't know. I mean, I don't know that many people who've read it at all, actually. I think that nowadays, people sort of skip it.
We know a disproportionate number of people who are deeply into that sort of thing.
Discipline,
and I don't think anyone's... Yeah. Sigfried Giedion is a son of a industrialist family from Switzerland, from Zug, and was born in Prague in 1888.
So he's a near contemporary of Le Corbusier.
Yep.
Yeah.
Yeah, he is very much of that, there had been a generation of modernists before.
Yeah.
But he is a member of the heroic generation of modernism.
Yeah.
He first does a degree in mechanical engineering, I think, to please his parents, who wanted him to work in the family textile business, textile factories.
Yeah.
Didn't really want to do that.
He did his PhD with Heinrich Wölfflin, so he was probably in Munich.
Or possibly Basel.
Yeah.
Such high quality research you get from about building cities.
One of those
Anyway,
attractive Central European German.
So he makes
cities,
the switch from mechanical engineering and does an art history, and then does an art history PhD, which becomes published as a book. Luke could give us some highlights.
Well, I tried to get hold of it. It's only available in German. It's about late neoclassicism, and in particular the kind of moment in neoclassicism around the start of the 19th century where a kind of romantic spirit starts to appear within kind of neoclassical design. So I think he was looking particularly at Schinkel. But interestingly, I think that actually it's a perspective which sounds like it would make sense in our discussion of Sohn as well, like something that comes up a lot. I was thinking a bit about like in Sohn's Law Courts, the way he revises what the scheme was under William Kent and people like that, where it's like a simple, rational enfilade of rooms into this kind of like crazy internal village where everything is different and everything is pieced together with a kind of exceptional sort of ingenuity and a lot of like individuality. Yeah, the kind of core of his idea is about like having not read it at all and read some reviews of it, is said to be about the rise of the like individual room within late neoclassicism as a sort of romantic.
Yeah, that's
topos.
interesting because Sohn is so much. I mean, I've been to some Schinkel buildings and they're great, but they're quite orderly and crisp.
Yeah,
they're kind of formally inventive, but they're not wild and eccentric. He gets offered various teaching positions off the back of his PhD, which was very well received. He's bright. Yeah. He turns them all down, and gets involved quite quickly in modernist circles.
Yeah, he has a kind of come to Jesus moment visiting the Bauhaus in, I think, 1922. He does a book which is all about kind of modernist living, and he becomes a kind of propagandist of modernism and kind of modern ways of living, and does lots of projects in collaboration with modernist designers, people like Marcel Breuer, and becomes the general secretary of the new organisation, the International Congress, that the modern architects have set up. And I think it was founded.
Which is really interesting because he's not an architect. He did do a little bit of design, it turns out.
Yes.
He helped design a lamp.
Yeah, we've got a little picture of him here with Corbusier in the foreground and him in the background kind of lurking.
But he
a lot of
is
smoking going on.
A key organiser in getting CIAM off, and is the Secretary General.
Yeah.
I think he's doing a lot of writing at this time as well, and he writes a book called Building in France, or something like that.
Yes, building in France, building in steel, building in something.
Ferroconcrete.
Yes.
Which is the term he uses for reinforced cement. Yeah. Reinforced concrete, which I think a certain amount of the content is reprised in this work, but which I think is sort of explicitly a kind of history and trends towards the new modernism, but written very early on, mid-20s, Yeah. So he's sort of watching the international style come into being, and I think that's tremendously exciting, and it's a world full of possibilities for him. But it's not just possibilities going on in Europe in the late 20s and early 30s.
No. Well, I mean, so I think that this like status as the a kind of chief like interlocutor on behalf of the modern movement is quite kind of useful. It gets him gets invited to America to give the set of lectures which becomes this book, and which also
significantly he was Jewish,
yeah.
German Jewish guy. So I mean Swiss still, so I guess he could have been fine in Switzerland, but
yeah.
How would you know that? And it wasn't feeling very comfortable. And also the political atmosphere in Europe was, to say the least, ominous.
Yeah.
Things were not going well.
The vibes were off. We've got some other pictures of things. He did a little development project with Marcel Breuer and some other architects in Zurich, and we've also got a picture of a lamp that he designed.
Which he helped design.
Yeah. Which it's very much about the ball joint, isn't it?
Yeah.
the ball and socket or whatever that is. Is that a ball? Yeah.
Yeah.
Anyway, it's got a significant range of motion in 2 different points. But yeah, so he kind of ends up in Harvard.
And they take him.
Yeah.
I guess he must have been very high profile.
Yeah.
I
think they needed a guy who could talk about the new stuff.
I wondered, in fact, in general with this book, I wondered what reception this guy... Because, I mean, he writes this big book and he's coming over and he's talking about America.
Yeah.
With pretty little background on it. He rocks straight up at Harvard.
Yeah. I mean, I think maybe he must have...
Some people must have been at least slightly pissed off.
I wonder, yeah. I think he must have visited before, though, don't you think? Because in the book, he also writes about... one of the things he draws on in the book is like quite a lot of hanging out with people and interviewing them and things. And he's obviously been to visit Frank Lloyd Wright, who obviously was still around. But I sort of feel like maybe he'd done a bit of it before then.
But the Frank Lloyd Wright, he's talking about going to Johnson Wax building.
Yeah.
That wasn't built until he got there. I mean, that's like, when's that, 30?
38, 39, yeah.
Yeah, so he was there anyway.
Yeah.
I think it's just that. I don't think he'd been. Well, he may have been.
Maybe
he was pretty well off, so
Yeah.
it was possible. But going to America was not a trivial.
Yeah, it took a while. People would go for a season, wouldn't they?
Yeah, you wouldn't pop over for a holiday.
Yes, wouldn't go to go.
It took a week.
Not to go shopping.
Yeah, took the better part of a week to get there.
Yeah.
I guess you could potentially fly if you were like head of state or something.
Yeah. He talks about the motivations for doing the book, and he kind of sets out various ones. The one which we've talked about already is this argument that the book is really all about, which is that we're entering a kind of axial age. We're entering this kind of pivotal moment. There are moments in history where things move into synchronicity, where the discoveries of mathematics, of science, of technology, of kind of philosophy, of art, all kind of pull together and sort of reframe the understanding of what life and cities and things and aesthetics can be. And we had been in one of those before in the Renaissance, in his view, and there's also been one at certain points in the Baroque, and at various points in history. There are these various moments in history where these breakthroughs occur, and we are entering one, and it's one that he wants to characterize. I mean, he kind of hedges his bets with this little comma in the title, but it's space-time. It's very much space-time. He
does talk about Einstein.
It's Einstein. It's Hermann Minkowski is the reference for the kind of for space-time as a concept that he gives. Right at the start, what he wants to say is, in the Renaissance there was this breakthrough moment which we can kind of characterize, which Jakob Burckhardt, who's one of his kind of art history idols, had sort of characterized around the invention of linear perspective, and that in an analogous way, space-time, this kind of new spatial scientific concept, is the one that we're going to use to talk about the new age, and we're going to be in an era, in a kind of space-time era. So that's like motivation number one for the book, is saying, here we are, this is where we're going, and let's try to sort of imagine it. He does have a couple of other ones that he refers to in passing. One is that even at this moment that the new age is kind of struggling to be born, already lots of really important stuff from history is being lost, and lots of buildings are being torn down in Chicago without people even knowing how important they are to the birth of modern architecture. So that's one of the things that he sort of cites there, that he says whether you knock them down or not is neither here nor there, but it's what to him seems...
He's a bit against it.
He's definitely against it, but he says the thing which is really unconscionable is to knock them down without even knowing how important they are.
When people say that, they mean don't knock it down.
Of course, don't knock it down. Of course, yeah, but it's
a piece of
rhetoric.
That's interesting, because I'd identified 3 core motives, and they're not any of those.
Oh yeah, give us another one.
So my 3 core motives, the first one, which is literally basically what he says he's doing, is to introduce European modernism to an American audience.
Yes.
The second one is a grander one, which he doesn't say he's doing, which is to be a sort of Boethius for history, which is to consolidate. In the early 20s, all the writings of Le Corbusier, there is a relationship between timeless qualities and modernism.
Yeah.
But modernism is, by most of its more ecstatic promoters, embodies a rift from the past.
Yeah.
And while that's not true for all of the architects who are part of the movement, and he is a very serious architectural historian, and I think he wants to write an architecture history which gives deep origins through time to modernism and gives modernism a firm historical grounding, and one also where pure international modernism can have a direct relationship with a long line of historic antecedents. And I think actually that element is one element that made this book popular and enduringly popular for a while, because it gave modernist architects, which is really most architects in the 20 years after the book came out, a way of thinking about the past. And in doing that, he is as enthusiastic, partisan, partial, and chauvinistic as you would expect. And I don't mean to say that in a sort of bad way. That you kind of need to be like that if you're going to write a history for not political, but kind of, there's very deliberate. He's got an axe to grind. It's on purpose.
There are goodies and baddies.
Reframing it.
Yeah, absolutely. And he's obviously not the only person who does it. Like Pevsner's Pioneers of Modern Design is another book in the same niche.
It's a funny relationship with Delirious New York, this book, because they're so completely different.
Yes.
But they are also covering a lot of the same ground in all. I mean, Raymond Hood crops up several times in this book. Not a figure I'd really thought about very much until I guess he was in the Chicago episode. And the other thing I thought is that he is trying to clarify and make logical and coherent thoughts about the next step for modernism. So he's trying to put it on a firm historical foot to kind of bring together, to heal the rift in time by reframing the past, and to kind of justify modernism as something that's time has come, because it's kind of we've been building up to it for hundreds and hundreds of years.
Yeah. Here we go.
It's pretty Hegelian, not entirely surprisingly.
It's yes, I mean it's he's a believer in progress. Progress is real.
From like the totality of society.
Yeah, progress is real. Yeah, one more thing about his kind of philosophy of like history and its relationship to design is architecture is obviously a part of its moment in time, and it's produced by its context. People have an understanding, people have a culture, they have things that they want, they have a kind of economic and technological base, and they have a way of doing things, and that kind of creates the sort of space of possibility for them to do something new, invent a new kind of architecture or form or whatever. But once it's invented, those things, they kind of become sort of transcendent, and they kind of enter the collective memory bank and can then be sort of drawn on in the future. So he has like a quite particular way of sort of splitting the difference between, is architecture something which is timeless, or is it something which is entirely kind of about and produced by its context, and it's sort of both at the same time.
And then if you wanted another thing that he really struggles with, is architecture made by heroes or is it made by moments? Both of which are obviously straw men. This sort of ridiculous. If you asked him, he would say unequivocally, it is not made by heroes.
Yeah.
It is made by the march of
kind
of coming together of historical confluences. And then he will talk about all of these heroic guys, basically, who did it. That's one he clearly struggles with.
Yeah.
He hasn't quite slain the hero myth.
No, indeed. There's a couple of things that he's very clearly against. One is 19th and early 20th century eclecticism. Yeah. That is the kind of evil spell that architecture has laboured under this last century. Yeah. I've put a kind of indicative image on screen, which is Liverpool. You've got the Gothic,
Three Graces.
The Three Graces and the Gothic Cathedral in the background.
Yeah.
And this kind of like subservience to the historical styles and to the necessity of adopting kind of historical detail. is something we've got to push against. Almost one of the only people that he calls out by name as being actively wicked is this guy, Meissonier. What's his first name? Is he called Albert Meissonier? The painter, anyway, who's a kind of 19th century, successful. I don't know. very successful French painter of the 19th century who did these big kind of historical canvases and made a lot of money. But
he hates things that have got ornament over the surface.
Yeah. And these kind of
to the extent that he cannot understand why anyone would be motivated by anything other than kind of the devil.
Yeah.
To doing that.
No
one could possibly actually like it.
Nowadays, it's so like baked into the way people talk about things that all the like Salon des Refusés kind of guys doing their proto-modern art are the good guys. But I actually love all of this cheesy stuff. I think it's brilliant.
Don't you think over the last like 30 years there's been a kind of revival of the cheesy stuff? It's certainly got a lot more expensive.
Maybe, I don't know.
Haven't
been following the auctions, but yeah, could we fit one of these in here? It's probably about the size of the size of the room. Yeah.
Do you want the big retreat of Moscow on your wall?
Oh, that'd be nice. Yeah. Maybe I think Francis would like it. It'd be good.
Yeah, horses. Horsey.
Okay, so I think we should.
And then we could do the weird clutch thing that he does, which is like civilization is in peril. We must bring together all the mighty forces. We're going to create this trifecta.
Yeah. Bring
everything to a moment to rescue civilization from the Nazis and from our own self-destruction. Right. Borromini.
Yeah. So the overview of what he's going to do is basically he's going to go through history, picking out these moments where there are key inventions. There are key architectural inventions.
Yeah, and it's a bit of a weird list, isn't it?
Yeah. So the first one will be kind of perspective and kind of a sort of antiquarianism built around perspective in the Renaissance. Then he's going to do some stuff about the evolution of technology and new materials, and then he's going to do two, which are kind of things which have happened within. Well, not necessarily within his own lifetime, but things kind of in the late 19th century. First of all, in Europe, which he characterizes as the demand for morality in architecture. And then in America, developments in American building and design from the middle of the 19th century up to the present day.
Well, it's sometimes difficult to disentangle what it is that... So the first example, I get the feeling that he's kind of starting with stuff he's been taught or a standard course.
Yeah, I mean, the whole thing is kind of a
ghost. The ghost of previous texts. People go to that like Old Testament or whatever, and they go, "Oh, there were these previous sources," and it's a sort of recombination.
Oh yes.
Or
this is really a Babylonian.
This thing comes from here, or there were these different books that became the Gospels, or whatever. This feels to me like it's got this slightly palimpsesty quality. Some of the early things, like
he's riffing. I mean, he's like riffing off. I think directly off Burckhardt's writing on the Renaissance, isn't he? I mean, so he talks perspective. He says it's the expression of the whole era. It's like this.
Yeah, but funny later on. He talks about this really key moment as being the production of that vault type.
Yeah. So we're looking at two pictures. One is Masaccio's crucifixion fresco, early 15th century fresco. You've got Jesus. It's got a sort of coffered barrel vault framed by some sort of columns, and you've got Jesus in the middle. It's using perspective to kind of give you like a very, very clear eye level. So you're sort of very much below the space that the crucifixion is taking place in, and you're kind of seeing this sort of coffered ceiling going down. And then there is a kind of real life version of this same like architectural motif in Alberti's church front in Mantua, whatever that church is called, I can't remember.
He talks about that, and then Bramante's funny church where the end's a false perspective.
I think people, particularly art historians, like go a bit over the top on perspective. He sort of talks about this as something which transforms the whole conception of what space is. Everything is different afterwards. And he's very dismissive about earlier medieval compositions. He talks about them as being in a kind of like floating, directionless space or whatever.
For him, the only energy in Gothic, which he mentions in passing, is... I mean, he says actually, later on in the book, he says about this Gothic and this painting that really the overriding question of European architecture up to this point is how to make vaults. Interesting statement.
Yes.
And really the interesting thing about perspective is the vaults, and the interesting thing about Gothic is the vaults. and he's very interested in modern conceptions of painting, that he couldn't think that some of the floaty things going on in Gothic art are perhaps, if you applied a kind of modern critical method to them, they are doing things.
Yeah, they're pretty sophisticated.
They're not just dumb.
Yeah, I was thinking about there's the Giovanni Pisano sculptural reliefs that they have in the cast quartz in the V&A, which are very clearly like not perspective, but they're incredibly sophisticated what they're doing.
The reason he puts things in is he's trying to make this case.
Yeah.
And it is a clear moment of technological progress leading to his relationship between science and art, isn't it?
Yeah, it is.
Very explicit.
The complete union of artist and scientist in the same person. And this is, I think this probably is, I don't know enough about history, but I think this probably is wrong, the way that he's characterizing this. But for him, this is the like model of great moments in the history of aesthetics, or the history of kind of design, are these moments of fusion, synchronicity.
It almost doesn't matter if he's wrong. He's trying to make a case.
Yeah.
And the reason that this is an interesting example is because it's a really clear example of something sort of technological leading to first something aesthetic and then something literally technological. His notion is really that perspective is discovered as a technology, which leads to this sort of perspective painting, which then in turn leads to this sort of vault being really existing, which is a sort of coffered barrel vault, which I think had kind of existed in antiquity. He's never going to say explicitly, the reason I put this in is because it's a good start gun for what I'm going, on the natural march towards international modernism. But you could see why he would include that as the first big example. The way he frames it is slightly strange for me, but I think it's because he's taken something basically from Burckhardt, thought about it a lot, and spat out this thing which is a really clear point in a manifesto.
Yeah.
And there's nothing strange in the kind of community of heroic international modernist forming people in producing a piece of propaganda. And if you compare this as propaganda to what Le Corbusier is putting out, which is really totally overt and unsubtle, I think about it that way around, you can sort of see, I think...
Sure, but I don't think Le Corbusier is pretending to be a historian, is he? That's not the...
No, but he's pretending to have a timeless understanding of, like, architecture.
That's what they pay you for.
This guy is a historian.
He is a historian, but I just...
Historians do that.
Yeah, sure. But no, I think that the criteria are slightly different for a work of history than they are for towards a new architecture or whatever.
Yeah.
We've got to start enumerating some of these transcendent discoveries of architecture. Another one he gives is the Patsy Chapel by Brunelleschi. He thinks there's basically a bit with a screen of columns, a kind of wall above it with a little arch-shaped cutout, and something about the kind of flatness and floatingness of this wall is intensely kind of attractive to him. He thinks that it's it's liberating the wall to become a kind of pure abstract plane, basically. Which is sort of something.
Was there some controversy about whether Brunelleschi had actually done this bit?
Oh, possibly.
That might not be true. I mean, he definitely did the middle. And it's interesting that he concentrates on that. I mean, it is quite striking. I found it quite cool when I first saw it. It does have this weird flatness where it feels like it's either made of some other material or it's it's stone pretending to be windows in a really strange way. Yeah. It's quite cool. It's not possibly the most striking thing about the Patsy Chapel, which would be this very geometric interior. Yeah. And it's interesting that he, in his historical examples, for the most part, doesn't really want to talk about what you normally talk about when you're doing architecture history, which is kind of composition, or things that are purely aesthetic. Now, I mean, the next example is going to be kind of like that, although he sort of hedges it. And that, I think, is really deliberate.
Yeah. So he sort of moves quite rapidly onto the late Baroque, and particularly Brunelleschi.
I mean, you can see this is a real spread, isn't it?
Yeah, this is a real spread.
So in an 800-page book, we have Patsy Chapel on one side.
And San Carlino by Brunelleschi on the other. Yeah, so we skipped out some stuff, fair enough. And
there's basically one interesting thing about each of these buildings, which is the front.
The so-called undulating wall of the front is the innovation of the Baroque. I mean, obviously it is wiggling. You don't generally
The
make shapes
facade
like
of that
this.
building is definitely novel, and it's definitely novel because it's in this tight corner.
And it's doing, and the way in which it's fully kind of composed and fully integrated, and then also on a strange wiggle is a new thing.
Those two examples are both kind of extraordinary, brilliant things.
Yeah.
That are novel.
Yeah.
But there are lots of other things you could pick out. For example, the interiors of both those churches, which are also highly novel and interesting.
There's a funny moment in this around here where he gets into a kind of footnoted debate with a contemporary art historian called Hans Zedelmeier, who had done a book all about Borromini, where he's sort of slightly weird and kind of pedantic notes, and goes down a bit of a tangent about where Borromini got his ideas from and whether they were from something in the villa of Hadrian or not. And then there's this kind of weird, like, unspoken undercurrent, which is like Zedelmeier
he's arguing with Nazis on the internet. Only the Nazis he's arguing with on the internet are the Nazis.
Yeah, Zedelmeier was a Nazi member of 10 years standing at this point, and Giedion obviously was fugitive in Harvard. I mean,
but it's the same dynamic, isn't it? It is arguing with Nazis on the internet.
It is,
if you're not careful...
about Borromini.
Yeah, well, that's how it goes. People get into these like weird spirals. I mean, try not to get involved, but you can get into these weird spirals where you're arguing about stuff. But anyway. This is a provocative spread, isn't it?
Yeah, and there's a nice photo of the it's quite amazing cupola of that's an Ivo cupola, which has a little spiral on the top. And then occasionally he'll kind of break out into these like trans-historical comparisons. So he's got a little picture of Tatlin's monument to the Third International, this enormous spiraling steel proposed tower.
And he talks about Borromini. I mean, I suppose this is true. These early architects are sculptors, but Borromini is not interested in sculpting figures, like, say, Michelangelo.
Yeah.
Or, painting, like Bramante. He really is only interested in sculpting abstract form, according to Sigfried Giedion. And so he produces these complex abstract geometries in his sculptures.
But again, so he wants to try and reprise... perspective's great because it is genuinely something which you can construct mathematically, and it's also a sort of aesthetic practice. And he wants to kind of reprise that synchronicity here, which he does through Pascal's ideas about geometry, particularly the cycloid curve and conic section, I think. Cool. And also atmospherics of like Dutch painting, these very, very long, infinite views. There's an idea, he's trying to kind of loop in a sort of idea of infinity. I don't know. It all feels like a little bit of a stretch, but there you go. There is something there.
There's the flatness of Brunelleschi, and then there's a series on first ideal cities, and his first sort of ideal city are based on pure geometries in plan, and that comes from the notion that geometry is good, plus star fortifications being new and technological. And he has a kind of history of the engineering of different types of bastions, and then says, so an ideal city is a kind of radiating thing because of a pure geometry. His ideal cities are almost like, or he identifies a type which is like a kind of reverse panopticon. It's a star fortification with a series of perspective points going towards a central temple, which has got a kind of relationship between power, control, and landscape. He's quite interested in the way that geometrical forms can kind of appear within star plans.
Yes.
And then he talks about how people do or don't actually succeed in implementing it in the Renaissance, which I think we can sort of skip over, because I think at this point with the revision he becomes very interested. If we're going to do a kind of metatextual analysis of this book, I feel that between the first edition and this revised edition there is a greater interest in what he's calling organic, which means a kind of integration of perspective and landscape. And so he has the kind of first ideal city, and then this like Leonardo da Vinci or Francesco di Giorgio version where you are applying an ideal form to a landscape and kind of... So he's really into the Baroque planning of Rome, and he likes the idea of someone deciding a long time in advance to create markers in a landscape that then a long time in the future become real things.
Yeah.
And that has a relationship with perspective.
Yeah. I think this book may have started off quite light on city planning and has progressively had more and more city planning added to it as the revisions go on. So after the Wiggly Wall, we get Guerini, who's another even later Baroque guy, mostly known for this very strange church in Turin. Have you been to this?
Yeah.
I haven't been. It's quite a mad one.
Well, that bit of it's quite cool. The rest of the church is, I mean, basically, that's the cool bit.
Yeah.
The dome, which is a copy of a much, much earlier dome, more or less.
Yeah, and it's also got a kind of relationship to Islamic architecture. You can get a very compelling photograph of it from below, given the right lighting conditions, because it's essentially got lots and lots of different nested geometries all the way up, creating this sort of strange fractal kaleidoscopic.
Yeah, I mean the dome at the top is a copy of one in Cordoba.
Yeah.
From the end of the first millennium, sometime.
In this one, the way in which he tries to spin it is that it is a kind of triumph of construction as much as design, that it's pushing the limits of what it's possible to build.
It's also someone who's really interested in exploring very different sorts of kind of geometric engineering solutions.
Yeah.
Which is something obviously that's feels really good if you're doing architecture history as going inevitably towards international modernism. Having someone who really thinks the interesting thing actually is to produce new engineering geometries to make cool effects. That's very modernist, isn't it?
Yeah. And then we get Rococo. It feels like we're very much on the main highlights of the European architecture survey course. But yeah, we get Balthasar Neumann's Church of the 14 Holy Companions, or whatever they're called, the 14 Heiligen, which is a Rococo.
I don't get what he was trying to do with this one. Dematerialization of light. The more I read it, the more I could apply. Oh, okay, so he's doing this to sort of build towards this idea. But because he's not ever telling you, or he doesn't tell you very much. I mean, he tells you, I'm writing for an American audience about modernism.
I mean, in reality, what's interesting about it is it's a different church type. It's like a nave church with a kind of end cross form, rather than these other Baroque churches that he's shown, which are either based around the dome or more kind of centralised.
I mean, I also think the undulating plane on the interior feels like he could have put the alto finished pavilion at the New York Fair there, or something like that. It feels like if he has a great interest in this modern wall that isn't structural and isn't just a surface. Yeah. But it's kind of like a moving thing.
I mean, the reality of Rococo is it's sort of doing a lot of the same stuff as Baroque, but the feeling is sort of opposite. Instead of being heavy and dramatic, it's light and evanescent. We're fast approaching the sort of cut-off where he wants to stop talking about architecture and switch over to being interested in engineering. I mean, his interest will go a little bit further in the field of urbanism, or kind of more urban scale schemes. So that after this, he'll kind of shift his interest over to landscape and urbanism.
The interesting thing about Versailles for him is that it is building... It's massive, and it's building in an open landscape. It's the relationship between a massive slab block and nature. Yeah. It almost as if he's going... It's huge. The thing that's interesting about this is that it's like kind of like deck access housing built in a green field, except that it's for a king. It's this massive block which is all kind of undifferentiated classical stuff, and you don't know what anything is. And it's bringing the whole apparatus of government into one place where the king is. Well, he also he talks quite a bit about the gardens, right? Yeah. The gardens, the gardens are the important bit. The gardens are about a new sort of scale and ambition, and sort of imposing this big geometric order onto large areas.
at Versailles, he likes the fact that there's a kind of big straight road that connects it all the way down to the city of Paris and the Champs-Élysées and things like that. Yeah, we have various pictures of the new urban spaces that they wanted to create in Paris at that time. Also a certain amount of, start to get a bit of England, and we've got Bath figures particularly. As,
I mean, the Bath history is... Well, before that, the meaning of the places...
Yeah.
It's the idea of moving from an urban place being something that does something, as far as I can work out, something like a market, to something that is kind of a point, like a city room.
Yeah.
And he starts to have these ideas of sort of city rooms, and that they have an architectural property, kind of creating of squares, which are really about the way they look and feel.
Yeah.
Not like it's a market. He has a curious reading of Bath. So Bath has got this... As I'm sure many of you will know, there's a couple of slides in an architecture history lecture which is like, okay, well, we're going to do this mass rich people houses, their terraces. First, there's a circus around one, and then there's a semicircle, which isn't quite a semicircle, and then there's this sort of wiggly one up the hill.
Yeah. And everyone's going to go there, all the rich people, hang out, non-stop parties.
Yeah, well, for a season. But the things that he's interested in the fact that it's a lot of little buildings making up a big building, and the edge of the houses is not differentiated.
Yeah.
And that then first there's the circus, where the sculptural potential of this is quite simple.
Yeah.
And then the Royal Crescent, which has a more complicated shape. It's kind of half oval.
Yeah.
Which follows the terrain and allows this thing to look out over a great landscape.
Yeah.
So it's kind of using the terrain to have these anonymous houses individually form a great palace.
Yeah.
And then he talks about the Lansdowne Crescent somewhere, which is a big swooping curve. And he's really interested that this...
I have that somewhere, I think.
He says this is most interesting because it could have been created by anyone. We know the name of the architect, but I'm not going to tell you because it doesn't matter.
Yeah.
What matters is that by this point, the technological sort of understanding that you can follow a landform to generate an interesting architectural property with a kind of continuous terrace is very interesting. And it's just like Le Corbusier's proposal for Algiers.
Yeah. And then, so we have a page with these three pictures together. Borromini's church facade, the Lansdowne terrace, and the crescent, rather, and the plan obus, this sort of mega structural proposal that Corbusier did for Algiers.
And that, in a way, is sort of just the sort of history he's wanting to do, which is that we're developing. Borromini's done this thing where he's got a tight site and he needs to create an interesting facade looked at an oblique angle.
Yeah.
The Lansdowne Crescent is spec building, but it needs to be spectacular spec building.
Yes.
And then the difference with Le Corbusier is he understands what he's doing.
Yeah, you have a kind of moment of also stuff that's slightly lost in time. At one point, he has this kind of offhand comparison between the Lansdowne Terrace and some Gropius proposal for Windsor. You have to do quite a bit of digging. It's a sort of strange little slab that he proposed at some point, which I think was going to be a little bit like the Isacon building, but in Windsor. Yeah. This I find quite a tendentious reading, which is Piazza del Popolo is this little planned square with these two buildings sort of on the historic edge of Rome.
Yeah.
But the important thing is that it encompasses different levels. There's a bit on the hill and there's a bit down in the square.
Sixtus V has had the idea that this is because of its topography, is a crucial place. So he put the obelisk in well before there's any city there. The idea is the obelisk.
Yeah.
And he's done a series of these where there's going to be nodal points of the city. And it kind of creates an axis going two ways, I think, through the city wall to the Vatican and kind of down the slope of the hill.
And here the great breakthrough is vertical and horizontal planes. which he sums up with
Yeah.
this little comparison to Theodan van Doesburg's kind of De Stijl compositions.
And to be honest,
This one for me does not really land.
He has spoken about it in my version. There's an extra bit where he's
Yeah.
spoken more convincingly about the Belvedere in its original incarnation, which is a kind of succession of level changes going up a natural slope between two walls. And he's spoken about how that's exciting to move through because of the way the slopes change with the view.
Well,
And I think you could have just got rid of this and left in the chat about the Belvedere, because it kind of at least makes
yeah, this one,
sense.
it makes an argument. Like you've got the same feature as in the Masaccio painting as in the Alberti building, and it is kind of the same wiggle. Yeah.
Like, once you strip away all the like long, careful text,
Yeah.
and just put the two things next to each other, it does start to have that slightly absurd character where we yeah, sure, like that's wiggly and Le Corbusier's wiggly, but putting the two things next to each other just it does render it
I feel
nonsensical.
like there's an ambivalence here, isn't there, where he keeps being drawn into doing proper historical contextualization of these things and kind of bringing them out and analysing them, but then there's a part of him which wants to do extremely tangentious, like Le Corbusier, two images on a page kind of argumentation, isn't it? And I think this chapter is kind of constructed around that incompatibility. I think that's sort of what's going on.
Part of the reason I was so keen to go through the different motives when we started is because some of those motives are not particularly mutually compatible.
Yeah, I think so. Yeah. Well, like as always, yeah. It's the self-contradiction is when people contradict themselves is when they get really interesting. Yeah.
Yeah. But I didn't mind it so much, actually. It's not completely ridiculous.
No. And I think that there is obviously some truth to it, isn't it? Like architects do constantly riff on ideas from the past, and
people didn't. Until Borromini, no one did do that sort of facade.
Yeah.
I can't think of a single earlier example,
No.
even going back to the Romans. No.
Oh well, there is the reference that they have from Hadrian's villa is this funny. I have got a picture of it, but it's basically it's a kind of internal court, and it's got a kind of cruciform plan. If you had like a cross made of two lozenges, so with curved ends, and it's got a kind of screen that goes around that form. So it's a kind of.
I think I know the thing that you mean.
Yeah.
But I think it's quite different
It
to
is,
that,
it is
actually.
different, yeah. I think we should do a quick little break there, or give ourselves the option.
Okay, yeah.
That might be the end of this episode, and if it is, you can find links to our social media, Patreon, images and things like that, all on our website, which is aboutbuildingsandcities.org. And see you on the next one.